What's up, guys, and welcome to the Rebalance podcast, where we dive into topics that matter most when it comes to overcoming struggles, injuries, and finding balance in your life. Everybody's idea of balance is that bit different, so my goal is to give you different perspectives, practical tips, as well as expert insights into what it means to live a balanced life. My name is Robbie Cassidy. I'm a physiotherapist and a health coach, and I've been helping people reignite their love for challenge, overcome their fear, and find more balance in their life through the process of self-development. So, let's get into it. What's up, guys, and welcome back to the podcast. On this episode of the podcast, we are going to dive into the importance of taking care of an issue or an injury early. And I want to talk a small bit about why it's important, as well as what are some of the, what's the research saying around it. Because a lot of people, when they get an injury, or if they have an issue that keeps flaring up, they often leave it for a while, and they kind of have the same strategies that to help the pain calm down. But the same thing keeps coming back again. And in other cases, that's obviously with the chronic side of things, and that's how a chronic case can develop, actually, just as a result. But in other cases, then somebody gets an injury, an acute injury, let's say a hamstring injury, it could be a shoulder injury or an ankle injury, and they leave it too long. They let pain dictate their rehab a lot, and in a bad way, not in a good way. You can do that in a positive way, and you can do it in a negative way. And in this one, I want to talk about the importance of it. I want to dive into some of the problems of getting started early, but I also want to talk about how you can some of the problems about starting late, but how you can start early and then really make a huge gains early on, so that your rehab goes a lot smoother as you go through it. So to jump into it, I guess the importance of, or the urgency of early rehab is that you want to look at what you can do as soon as possible after the injury to help set you on the right path. And the reason being is that what it does is it helps you to adopt this proactive mindset. And if you look at some of the problems of delaying your return, what happens is that you'll push back to return, you'll push back your usual activities. And then what the research shows is that the longer you delay, the longer it takes to get back. And there's one paper in particular that I'm referring to here. It's Bayer 2017, and they looked at beginning rehab 2 days post-injury versus 9 days post-injury. Okay, the reason the 2 days is picked is because that's kind of the end of the inflammation stage. You have your inflammation stage, which is in and around 48 hours, and it's obviously going to change for people, but that's why they picked that 2 day mark, so that you're not doing further damage earlier on. But I bet you in years to come, when we get a better understanding of the inflammation stages and what contributes to that, and what parts of that you need to work into a small bit more, you'll find that there'll be little things you can do within that stage that are going to promote it even more. So looking at the return to play, and looking at what Bayer was looking at, is that they found that if you start 2 days versus 9 days post, you can reduce your recovery time by up to 3 weeks in some instances. Now, that's obviously not going to be the case for all injuries. This is more for muscular injuries. 3 weeks is a huge difference in time, and from starting 7 days, that's starting a week earlier. And the reason being is that, well, first off, when you start 2 days after, you adopt that proactive mindset, and I'll talk about it as we go through it, but that's going to be a huge thing. You're going to start taking care of the things around it as well. While if you start to leave it off, and you leave it till 7 days after the injury, or even 9 days after the injury, that becomes a bigger problem, because then you have the side of deconditioning and picking up the bad habits, as well as the injury itself not getting a chance to heal properly. Okay, and what a lot of people will do in that time is they'll completely rest. And as we know now, complete rest is not a good option. So for muscular injuries, they're finding that if you start 2 days after versus 9 days, it can have a 3 week difference in your return to play. If you look at then why the other problems that are involved with delaying your rehab, is that you can develop these bad habits and coping mechanisms, and oftentimes these are what lead you to getting a chronic injury. If it's like a minor injury that you don't take care of, and you continue to do the same things over and over again, that's how you can develop a chronic style injury. So I guess what you're looking at here is the idea of, let's say with a back injury, if you get a back injury, a coping mechanism for a lot of people is complete rest, and they want to avoid lifting and they want to avoid bending down. they'll also start to avoid certain exercises, and they'll develop these fears and beliefs around certain exercises and certain things causing the issue in the first place. Then they'll start to develop a fear around the pain and what that is and what that causes. And as a result, they'll start to take painkillers, anti-inflammatories, or they'll look for short-term or quick fixes. This is such a common pattern when you look at these type of injuries. And if you don't notice these coping mechanisms or these bad habits, they can slowly but surely seep into your lifestyle. And then as a result, it'll be 3 months down the road, 4 months down the road, you're still not doing anything because you haven't taken care of those issues. You never address those beliefs, and now it's becoming a bigger problem for you. So that's a huge one. And the painkillers is a big one, because when we start to take painkillers, we start to rely on painkillers. Well, first off, as you can see in countries that have probably taken that approach too much, the one I'm referring to mostly is the epidemic that's in the States at the moment, where painkillers were basically given out for every issue, and now it's becoming a huge crisis over there in the fentanyl crisis and everything involved with that, the addiction side of things. That's obviously at one end of avoiding pain completely. But when you start to take painkillers, you put it off in the back of your head, so it's not main priority. While when there's a pain there, oftentimes that should be a priority, that you should be trying to work on that, and you should be trying to improve it, because the reason that you're getting the pain in the first place, it's a survival mechanism, it's a protective mechanism. So we should start to lean into that a bit more and start to understand it and understand what we can do to improve it. But if you take those painkillers, as I said, it's a bad habit, it becomes a coping mechanism, and oftentimes this leads us to a path of just continually taking them. And I think everyone has probably gotten caught in this. I've done this myself when I've had little injuries in the middle of a season where I didn't want to take care of them years ago, and I started to just rely on painkillers to get me through matches at different times. And it's not a good option. I think everybody understands that it's not a good option. But it's just, I want to kind of relay that message on again. Now, the other thing is the overprotectiveness, and I talked to this a small bit when I mentioned the back issues, about where you're avoiding it, you're avoiding all the pain, and you're avoiding bending down, lifting, you're avoiding certain exercises, and you're delaying rehab, or you're delaying movement in it because you don't want to injure it more early on, which is really common. Like it's a natural response. Realistically, you've had the injury, you don't want to make it worse, so the easiest way to do that is to avoid all the pain and to not do anything with it, which as you can understand would be like, if you think of it on first level, it's like that makes sense. But when it comes back to the basic principles of healing, and movement is going to be such an important thing, and circulation, and you look at how the body heals neurologically, and then how it heals, let's say, like a muscle, or if it heals tendon, if it heals ligament, it's always comes back to circulation, movement, coordination, adding these things together. And then start to trying to incorporate them into movements. And if you're just going to rest and you're overprotective and you don't move that at all, you don't give it that opportunity to do it. So, and what can happen then is, I mentioned earlier on, I touched on creating a chronic issue, is that if you let the body's protection mechanisms get out of control, and if you let the pain side of things get out of control, what can happen is you'll create this, what I like to describe as it's like a burn spot on the nervous system, where the body, if it gets flares, and this is really common, this is such a common issue when it comes to chronic back pain, it's probably the main issue when it comes to chronic back pain, is that it's the nervous system's response to stimulus has lowered, let's say, so that the threshold of you, if you overexert yourself, the threshold for your pain and tightness is way lower at the area of the back, okay? So what happens is you touch off that burn spot and it flares everything up. So you're getting loads of pain and loads of discomfort, and you're getting loads of tightness, stiffness, everything, but you haven't changed anything. Okay, and that's comes back to the burn spot. That comes back to your body's protective mechanism, because you can have pain without injury. I say it in nearly every podcast. You can have pain without injury, and if you understand that, that can really direct your rehab in a lot of ways. And then obviously the avoidance behaviors, as I was saying, where you'd say, okay, like you'll see a common one with back pain, and this is actually one I see a lot here. I'm in Argentina at the moment, for anyone that's listening who doesn't know. I see a lot of people using a back brace on a day-to-day at work, where they have to go lifting something, they have to go moving something, and they put the back brace on. And I don't know if it's due to, like, if it's part of the workplace management. You'll often see the manual handling courses, such a load of shite, but they often get people to do this as well because of the back pain epidemic, if you would want to call it that, and everything associated with it. But yeah, so they get these they like where you're pushing people to use a back brace to be protective of your back. As a result, that's going to cause overprotective behaviors, and as a result, you're going to develop certain beliefs around what you should and what you shouldn't do. Okay, and these things can really contribute to you developing this burn spot and developing this, I guess, weakness in an area. And I don't really even like to describe it as a weakness, because the weakness only comes in time with when you're not using it as much. But really, it's deeper than that. It's the more of a neurological side of things, of the overprotection side of it. So that's a huge one. The avoidance behaviors are massive there. Now, the other side of it is that you have, when you look at not taking care of your issues early on, you have to take into account that the longer you delay your return, in a lot of cases, means that the more likely you are to suffer from deconditioning and overall just lower physical conditioning. And this is a really common one when you look at somebody who's been dealing with the same injury for months to years at a time, and it's kind of affected their beliefs and affected their attitudes towards getting back to activity. And I talk to people week in, week out who are dealing with all sorts of injuries, who've been out of play for a year or 2 years, and they feel that once they get back, that everything flares up again, or once they get back, they re-injure it. And what happens in a lot of cases here is that the body has gotten so deconditioned that when you get back to play, it's just not at the same level. It's not at the same speed. And as a result, you're going to be more likely for injury when you're deconditioned. It's like when you haven't played in a while and you get back and you play something. If you haven't sprinted in a while and you get back and you sprint, or you haven't been to the gym in a while and you get back into it and you do too much. Doing too much too fast after doing too little for too long, such a huge contributor to injury. And when you look at delaying your return, this is going to be a huge part of it as well. So the delay means that you're going to, let's say, technically you're at a higher risk of injury if you do too much too fast. But if you're smart about your approach, you can minimize that and you can get back to it. And returning to exercise when you're feeling better as well, this is a point I wanted to make, is that when you're feeling better as opposed to actually when you're ready to get back is another one. So like if you took off the week after you injured it, if you let's say you went 2 days and you had a light hamstring tear, grade 1, let's say, and you did nothing for 7 days until you felt like, oh yeah, it's actually good when I'm walking around, I don't feel it that much anymore, and then you go back out and you run. I know you might say, like, that's crazy, Robbie, nobody does that. You'd be surprised the amount of people that do that, where it feels good or they're walking around, so they just jump back into training and then they tear it again. That is so common. That's unbelievably common, to be honest. But what happens there is you start to feel like, well, it's actually not that bad. I'm moving around on a day-to-day. But on a day-to-day, you're not really testing it. You're not testing it to the same level that you would be in a sport or in an activity, during an activity. So you're obviously going to have a higher risk of injury here because you haven't taken care of it on that level, or got it to the level that it was at before. As I said, if you hadn't sprinted in 5 years and then you decided to jump in a 100-meter dash race, what do you think are the chances of you pulling a hamstring or injuring yourself during that race, considering you haven't done it so long before, or you haven't done any type of running at top speed before, or in the last 5 to 6 years? That's the exact same as when you just walk around and you leave it till the pain goes away, and it's gone away when I'm walking, so it should be gone away completely. No, once you start to run again, you put more pressure on it at a level that the body may or may not be able to handle. So they're the things that we need to always look at. They're the problems that I often see if you don't get back to or if you don't get into your rehab early on, there's some of the issues that can arise or develop after. So I guess now that you know the issues and the problems, let's look at and switch to the solutions and look kind of the path of forward, what you should start to do straight away when you get an injury, and what you can do to work on it, and how you minimize the effects of those problems. Well, it's the idea of the early bird principle, getting back into it and doing what you can early. So getting down soon as possible and taking a proactive approach to it. Okay, what this does is it breeds the right attitude of you'll start to then take care of the other things around it. And really, a lot of the success stories when you look at rehab and when you look at people who are getting back after a big injury is the mindset shift. That's the huge part of it. The physical side of things isn't that difficult to overcome because there's certain exercises and certain movements and certain loads that you'll be able to build up to get back. But the mindset of having that proactive approach, being able to overcome the obstacles and the downfalls along the way, Like, that's a huge part that a lot of people miss out on, and that's a big part of the hero's journey, let's say, in that a lot of people that I'm working with, they'll mention that, okay, right, I got back to activity, I got over the back pain or the knee pain or the hip pain or whatever it was, but it was the mindset shift of them knowing that if they focused on something and they were committed to it and they took their time and they properly approached it, that they were able to achieve it. Like, that's a huge part of it that people often miss out on, because when you've been hit by the same thing over and over again, your confidence in your body gets knocked massively because it just feels like you're going on in circles. What's up, guys? Robbie here. I hope you are enjoying the podcast so far. I want to take a moment just to personally ask you for your help. If you're enjoying the podcast, would you be willing to share it with someone you think would love it too? Maybe a friend, family member on social media, or even if you just brought it up in conversation with someone you know. The recommendation means the world to us, and it's because of people like you that we get to be able to produce this podcast on a weekly basis. So thank you so much for your support so far, and I would love if you could help us reach even more people who could benefit from it too. Really appreciate you, and we're going to jump straight back to the podcast. So I'm always big on the mindset of it, and taking that proactive approach really pushes the right mindset, I feel, for it. Now after that, you look at commitment. So you know what to do. You started to get back early. You have the right approach to it. So now you need to commit to this approach. And what that is really what we're looking at is having a plan with goals and objectives that you can touch on and you can reach along the way. Is a great way to build on. It's a great way to build discipline, motivation, but kind of build momentum as well. And as a result, you have the proactive approach, and now you have this plan in place that you're going to start ticking these boxes off. If you do that, that helps massively, because there's going to be obstacles along the way. It's going to feel like you're back at square one. There's no question that always happens. But when you know, okay, well, I'm going to use this as a marker. I couldn't run 2 kilometers before. Now I can run 2 kilometers. That's a very clear marker that I've improved. I used to wake up with a load of pain in the morning. I don't have any pain in the morning. That's another massive marker that you have improved. And understanding this is huge. It's key to building better discipline and keeping the motivation high as you go through it. So knowing the pitfalls as well can be huge, and the issues you're going to run into along the way, and knowing what each phase entails is another huge one. Like, if you know that, okay, once we start to get to a certain point, the body may or may not kick back, and we have to maybe change our approach or add in a deload week or change the exercises that we're doing. You know, once you understand that, then it's not as big of an obstacle when it comes up. But if you don't understand that, it can be difficult. But a lot of times that comes with working with somebody who knows what they're doing. Then it's like setting time aside each week to work on it. This is a big one that people run into, is when you get the injury, you step out of sport. Now, you might have been training twice a week or 3 times a week in the activity that you were doing before, and now you're injured, so you stop doing everything, and then people can't find time to do rehab, even though they're not doing the sport anymore or the activity anymore. That's an issue. Because what I say to people is, if you can stay involved in the activity or sport as much as possible, you can go on certain nights and then you let them train at one side and you do your bit on the other side. Or if you're a runner, that you still every Tuesday night at 8 o'clock you just sit down and you do your rehab as opposed to getting out and doing your running, then it becomes a lot easier, because you're not changing your routine that much. It might be a shorter workout, obviously, because you might not be able to do as much, but you're still keeping the routine, and with routine it's so much easier to do these things. So just because you're out of training, it shouldn't mean that you change up your schedule completely. That's a big point that I wanted to touch on, because people do say, I can't find time for rehab, but you were able to do it before, so why not we just squeeze it in together? Anyway, looking at the next one, smart training. Being efficient and effective in your training without overdoing it. That's what we're looking at in smart training. So that comes down to load management, as I was talking about earlier on. Having your heavy days, your light days, having your blocks where you're pushing for, let's say, 4 or 5 weeks, and then you have a deload week, or maybe 6 weeks and you have a deload week, depending on the type of injury that you're dealing with. Making sure that you're incorporating strength and conditioning, and within that you have the different levels of it. So it's like you have your, obviously, anaerobic, aerobic, then you have your plyometric, then you're working on your isometrics, eccentrics, like concentrics. I'm not going to go into all the details of it, but in a general sense, making sure that your strength and conditioning is varied as well, so that you're not just doing like what I often see with people with back pain: do the bird dog, do your cat cows, and the dead bugs, and you'll be good. No, that's not the case, because if you see it with sports people all the time, if you're like a GA player, or if you're a sprinter, or if you're a swimmer, and your shoulder pain as a swimmer kicks up after swimming for 10 minutes, but your rehab is just, okay, do these chest flies, and then do these whatever farmers carries, and then do some form of a pull exercise, and do some bit of a band pull apart, whatever it is, that's the only exercise that you do, but there's none of it actually in the pool. Well, then do you reckon that at the 10-minute mark you're going to be much better? Probably not. It might be that you need to build it up. You need to look at what's happening around the 10-minute mark. Is it fatigue that's kicking in? Because if it is, that you go for your 8 to 9 minutes, or you even go to the point that you feel like it's going to kick up, then you pop out, do a little bit of rehab, try get back in again, see if that helps. That's what it comes down to, smart training. But that really comes with working with a professional. So you should, when you're dealing with these type of issues and you want to get back early, it's always important to work with a professional as well. Because there's a lot of excellent professionals out there who really know what they're doing and can really help you get back to where you're going. But it's just that sometimes people don't commit to it enough. And obviously ask for assistance, so get your professional help. The next one then is aggressive. I'm very aggressive. I prefer to be aggressive with my rehab because I think that people are too soft with their rehab, if I'm honest. I think people do things, obviously it depends on the person that you're dealing with and their tolerance for discomfort, their tolerance for pain, what their goals are, what they want to get back to. But I think that a lot of rehab is probably a bit too soft, and as a result people don't stick to it, and as a result they don't get the results that they want. But if you're a bit more aggressive, if they know what they're pushing for, if they know what they're doing and know why they're trying to do it, then it becomes more motivating to get it done. Definitely. Because you're pushing, you're testing it out, you kind of have your high days and your low days, you understand the type of pain that's a good pain and the type of pain that's a bad one that you should lean into and one that you should pull back from. And you just have a better overall understanding of what to do. You're going to get back faster. And then lastly is the reintegration, and this is the part that I think that I feel a lot of professionals have an understanding of it, but they struggle to actually incorporate it into the rehab side of things, and it's difficult as well when you're working in a private situation, because someone will come into you, and then when they feel they're good, they'll just jump back into training and they won't come back in and check in again. So it's difficult to manage the load along the way with this. But it's reintegration back into your activity and into your sport, and making sure that you're slowly getting back in, you're testing it out. I try to do this as early as possible, but then also kind of pulling back, reassessing, seeing what worked, seeing what didn't work, modifying it a small bit, and then getting back in and testing it out again. Because it is trial and error. Like, there's no perfect solution for everybody. And the only way you can find what works for people is through trial and error, is through understanding the broader scope of what's going on, kind of looking at it and then taking little aspects of each, merging them together, looking at the lifestyle of the person, and then trying to find out what works for them. Okay, so that's why I feel that it's so important to start early and be aggressive, be smart, and make sure that you avoid the pitfalls of just looking for short-term relief and short-term fixes, because they can lead to long-term issues, long-term injuries if you do stick to them. So it's better take the time, reach out to a professional, get an understanding of what's going on, and then look to fix it. Have a clear plan and work along that line. And if we do that, the goal is to hopefully not get that injury ever again. Like that, not saying that that's going to happen 100% of the time, but it can happen a lot of the time. And if you leave it off too long, there's more of a chance of you getting it again. So which way do you want to play it? That's what I would say. But that's all from me today, guys. Hopefully, and girls, hopefully that gives you a better understanding of what to do and why it's important to take care of these issues early, as opposed to waiting until they become a bigger problem and it's a year down the line you're still dealing with the same thing. For those who are interested, I do have, if you're dealing with back pain, I have a course out at the moment. It's a spine initiative course. It's a 6-week course to get people from who have back pain and who are out of exercise, back into running, and complete their first 5k running. Now that 5k, you can do it on the road or you can do it in the gym, but it has all of it has the kind of the understanding side of it, getting a better, way of building a schedule that works for you. It also has the mobility, movement and strength exercises included, as well as a graded progression into running. And if you go on spineinitiative.com or check in the description here, you'll see people who've been through it and who's had a lot of success with it already, and who also are now pushing on to do bigger things after it, and looking to really extend the amount they're doing. So it tackles mindset, it looks at a holistic approach, and it also looks at the physical approach. So a lot of the stuff that I was talking about in this It incorporates all of that, I should say. And it also incorporates the idea of Kaizen. And Kaizen is a Japanese approach of taking what works, doubling down on that, and getting rid of what doesn't work. And that's why it's important to look at it that way. I feel it's so important to take that approach, because then you're not just stuck doing things that aren't working for you. You're taking what works, you're incorporating those, and you're getting rid of the other things to be as optimal, to optimize your time and get the most out of every training session. So definitely check it out. It's not something that you would have ever come across before for back pain. It's a really, really effective program, and I'm delighted now to have it released fully. So check out the link in the description. But that is all from me this week. I hope everyone else is doing well out there, and let me know if you need anything in the meantime, or reach out to me on Instagram at Mobility Tutor if you need anything at all. Lovely stuff. I will chat to you all again next week. Have a good one. Okay guys, thank you so much for listening to today's podcast. I hope you enjoyed the show. If you're looking to learn more about what we do, as well as check out any of the mobility and rehab programs we have available, just head over to the description of this podcast and you will find a link to all the programs there. As always, thank you for listening, and I will chat to you all again in the next episode. Have a good one.